All right, I guess we'll get started. This is a really big crowd. Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah.
So just to introduce myself, hi, my name is Alexis. I'm currently a senior at Johns Hopkins University studying computer science. And today I want to share with you guys a topic that I have been really passionate about. And as you can tell from the title, it's about Mixnets. So before we get into all the cool things and all the technicalities about Mixnets, I want to share with you guys a little story of my first time running the Mix node for the Mixnet that I'm going to talk about today. So back in 2021, this is my first time got interested in all the privacy and cybersecurity stuff. And I remember I would just come back home after school, Googling stuff, and then find some new cybersecurity tools I would download and try them out. And then one thing leads to another. One day, I stumbled upon this thing called NIM. Back then in 2021, I didn't have a lot of experience, and they have this whole guide of setting up a node to how to be a node operator to run the Mix node. Eventually, I figured it out, and I was so happy, so I took this photo. And little did I know back then that 4 years later, I would be doing all the things that I'm doing right now and to be able to have a talk on this. And for all those of you in the back that couldn't see the date, it's 2021, April 17, so it's almost exactly 4 years ago today, so this was a really special talk for me, so there you go. So to help build up the concepts and ideas of a Mixnet, let's start with some basic concept of how a VPN works to help it build up to that decentralized Mixnet. So basically, when you have a VPN, you have the VPN client on your phone or on your desktop. Let's say Proton VPN, for example. When you connect to the VPN, you're essentially establishing a connection with the VPN server through the Internet Key Exchange. And that VPN server helps you to route your request to the Internet. And how packets are encrypted during this process. So for the user, you have an IP address for the website you want to visit, and then you have a payload, let's say a message. When you connect to the VPN client helps encrypt the IP packet to the server, to the payload, the whole payload, and attaches the server IP on the top of it. And then the VPN server, when they get the payload and the whole packet, it decrypts the server, it decrypts the whole payload, gets the web IP, and to send the whole thing to the internet. And the problem with the VPN is that you're putting a lot of trust in the VPN server. So essentially, you're giving all of your data to the VPN server. It can see your web IP address, it can see what website you're visiting, it can see a lot of things. So there are a lot of sketchy VPNs out there, so not the best idea. So to move on from the VPN, moving on to the Mixnet, we have Tor. So for how Tor works, you have a Tor client. And then you have entry node, relay node, exit node, and you have the internet. So basically, we're routing through 3 different layers and a little bit better than a VPN than just having one. And how packets are encrypted in this process is that in the very innermost layer, you have the web IP of the website that you want to visit and the payload. And then on top of that, the next layer, you include the exit node IP addresses. And then on top of that, you include the relay node IP addresses. So when you use the Tor browser, you connect to the Tor client. The Tor client creates this whole packet. It gets the IP address for the entry node, send the whole packet to the entry node. The entry node decrypts the first layer, gets the relay node IP address, send it to the relay node, and then relay node decrypts one more layer, see the exit node IP addresses, send it over to exit node, and eventually gets a website IP address and send it to the internet. But why not Tor? I know Tor is a very private and secure option, and whenever I go to conferences, people give stickers like use Signal, use Tor. But just to play the devil's advocate here, there are some attacks that's related to Tor. For example, for an attacker that controls an exit node and an entry node, they could do time analysis to analyze the traffic patterns, to de-anonymize packets, and also many other attacks. But that's not the only reason. The problem with Tor is that there's little incentives for operators to run nodes. Because in a Mixnet, you want a diverse amount of nodes. You don't want a few nodes to control a large amount of traffic. So imagine an attacker to control a few nodes. They just have a more likelihood to de-anonymize your traffic. But at the same time, when you want to give people rewards and incentives for running node, You don't want an infinite amount of people running nodes, because that will just lead to the case of a bad actor introducing infinite amount of nodes into the network to lead to an Sybil attack or to just take down the whole network. So at the same time, with the incentives, you will also want to add some costs for running node. For a node operator, you need to put a certain amount of money when you first start running a node to have both incentives and costs to make sure a stable network. So beyond the Tor, there are many other decentralized mixnet in development right now. And today I want to focus on one of them. It's a NIM mixnet. So basically, this is a graph that I got from their white paper. Just to briefly go over their graph, you see you have the user on the left, and the key infrastructures include the validators, gateways, entry gateway, exit gateways, the NIM mix nodes in the middle, and then you have the NIM blockchain and the ultimate service provider that you're connecting to. So how it works is that, let's say you're a user and you want to use this mixnet. And what you would do is, first of all, you would deposit a certain amount of tokens, and then after depositing to the blockchain, you get a proof of deposit. You send that deposit at a 1, the number 1 labeled on here, to the validators, which controls the blockchain. The validators then check with the blockchain to see if you actually deposit that amount of money. If the check comes back correct, it gives you a certificate for bandwidth, and certificate for service. The bandwidth just indicating how much data you can use, and the service just indicating what service you can use. And then when the user, now getting all the certificates, you can actually connect to the mixnet. So the user sends a certificate of bandwidth indicating how much bandwidth and data they can use to the entry gateway. The entry gateway then sends a certificate to the NIM blockchain to check if the certificate has not been spent. If it return from the gateway. If all checks were correct, the gateway then starts to route your traffic through 3 layers of mixed nodes. And then after routing through 3 layers, it sends to the exit gateway, and the exit gateway sends to the service provider. Or it could just be another user also running this mixnet. So to simplify the graph that I had before, you can essentially imagine there's a client, an entry gateway, 3 nodes, and an exit gateway, and a destination. And one of the core features that it does that's better than Tor is continuous time mixing. So basically what it does is when you have Tor, when you send a packet from node 1, for an attacker monitoring the traffic at node 3, they may be able to do time analysis or timing correlation because packets are not delayed. So for continuous time mixing, how it works is that, let's say you have 2 packets, packet A and packet B, and you send the packet A before packet B. And at node 1, when node 1 gets those 2 packets, it doesn't necessarily send A before B just because you send A before B. Each packet is delayed for a certain randomized amount of time before they're sent it out. So when you send packet A before packet B, it's very likely that packet B might send before packet A, or packet A might just send regularly. So there's really harder for attackers to tell which packets correlate to which. The next core feature of this mixnet is called cover traffic. So previously for Tor, we're only accomplishing unlinkability, which is essentially saying that for an attacker, we don't want people to see what services we're accessing. But still, for an observer of the network, they're still able to see that you're using the network, and we don't want that. And in this case, we want unobservability, which is essentially saying that we don't want an attacker to see if we're sending any data at all. So basically, what it does is to use cover traffic. So as soon as the client connects to the mixnet, even if you're not sending any requests, you're not sending any packets, it's generating random packets as cover traffic to send that through the mixnet. Because you're all encrypted in a Sphinx packet format, you're not able to tell if it's a real packet or it's a cover packet. So it's really harder for people to tell, first, to not link the services you're accessing, and 2, to not be able to tell that you're even using the service in the first place. And the third thing that the core feature I want to talk about is the layered network topology. As you can see here, we have 3 mixed nodes in the middle. And how those 3 mixed nodes are layered is essentially using a verifiable random function every epoch time, which is 60 minutes, to re-randomize all the nodes in the network to the 3 different layers. And what it does is a validator in the network will generate a random value x. send that value to the blockchain, which the blockchain would then broadcast that value to all the nodes in the network. And every node has a secret key. It uses a verifiable random function to use its secret key and that random value x to compute a value y, and then to do mod 3, which gets the layer that it should be on. And the reason for doing that, one of the reasons is that for an attacker, you don't want them to purposefully to position a node in one layer, because that just would make it easier for them to uncover the traffic. Because to see what services someone is using, you essentially want to control all 3 nodes on the path to be able to de-anonymize the traffic. And by randomly reordering the nodes to different layer every 60 minutes, it makes it harder for attackers to do so. And the next thing I want to talk about is this special packet format that this Mixnet uses to encrypt a packet. So at the very high level, every packet has a header and a payload. The header is encrypted using the AES counter mode, and the payload is encrypted using a white block cipher. So essentially, when the client is about to send a packet, it constructs the Sphinx packet format. At the very innermost layer, it has a destination IP address, and then it has a payload. And on top of that, it adds a header of the exit gateway IP, and then the node 3 IP, the node 2 IP, and the node 1 IP. So the client creates this whole packet and sends it to the entry gateway. The entry gateway decrypts the first layer to get the node 1 IP addresses, send it to node 1 decrypts one more layer, get to node 2 IP, send it to node 2, node 2 decrypts one more layer, get to node 3 IP, and then send it to node 3, and then get the gateway IP, send it to exit gateway, and eventually route it through destination. So one of the ways that Sphinx packet format does to prevent attackers messing with the headers or payload is using an HMAC integrity check, which takes in the ciphertext of the header, and also the shared secret key with each node to compute an HMAC as the integrity tag. And for every node, when they receive the packet, the first check if the integrity tag matches. And if it doesn't match, it drops the entire packet, just to make sure that people don't mess with the header or the payload. So another feature that it uses is anonymous replies with single-use reply blocks. Essentially, it's just one of the blocks at the end of the message that says, I am the sender, this is my IP, I want you to send a reply to that IP back to me. And that creates some problem. It's a very useful feature, but it does come with problems. So one of the known attacks with single-use reply blocks is that, let's say you have a client A and a client B. And the client B, it's an attacker, someone that wants to do damage. So client A sends messages with single-use reply blocks, as usual, and the client B in this case used the reply blocks to request A to send more and more single-use reply blocks. So client A saw the request, thinking that they need more space for their reply, so they send out more. And then at this point, when client B gets a large amount of reply blocks, it sends back all the accumulated single-use reply blocks, and by doing so, they can monitor the entry gateway traffic permutation to find out which one A is using. And the next feature that I want to talk about for this decentralized mixnets is called verifiable localization in decentralized system, or for short, VERLOC. So previously, a lot of the verification for location has problems because it's using a trusted landmark. So if an attacker wants to attack the network, they can just spoof the landmark to mess with the location. And what VERLOC does in this case is to verify nodes are where they say they are without using trusted authorities or landmarks. And to simplify this, basically what it does is to measure the internet round trip time between a node and a set of pseudo-randomly chosen reference node, and to infer the distance from the time measured. And those set of pseudo-randomly chosen reference node are optimized during the process to make sure that the landmarks or the trusted authority or the central measurement is decentralized. So how can you actually use it? So at the moment right now, there's a VPN client that you can actually use, and there are 2 different modes for this VPN client. As you can see for the photo on the left, it's the WireGuard mode, which is just like any other VPN you're using, nothing really special, and you can choose your entry and exit gateway. For the photo on the right, you have the anonymous mode, which is essentially routing the traffic through the mixnet. You can also choose entry node, the entry gateway and the exit gateway, but you don't get to choose the mix node. The client will randomly pick one node from the 3 layers and build a pass and route your traffic through that. So how do you actually pay for something like this? Obviously, you can just pay with regular dollars, but in this case, there's this ecosystem as tokenomics, which is basically you get to be a node operator. When you get to be a node operator, when you run nodes, you get tokens as rewards, and then you can use that token to use your service eventually to access the mixnet. So in this tokenomics, we have basically 3 key things: the stake, node operators, and delegators. So as a node operators, anybody can be an operator as long as you can run nodes. And what you would do when you want to run a node is that you would put a certain amount of stake first before you set up a node as a measure to prevent Sybil attacks, for example, many bad nodes setting up in the network. And for delegators, what they would do, they're essentially like investors. They have lots of tokens, and for every node that they think is performing well, they invest your tokens or stake to the node operators. And by investing those amount of tokens, so every time that a node operator gets some rewards from running a node, the delegators share part of the profit. And so when you're running a node, you want your node to be actively selected to get the rewards. And the selection probability for this is to stake times the configuration score times the performance score, and the last 2 is raised to the power of 20. So for configuration score, essentially measuring if you accepted a terms and condition and what version of Mixnode you're running, because the goal is to essentially, we want to encourage people to run Mixnode on the latest version. And the performance score is just a network monitor sending test packets to see how packets are performing and essentially measuring the uptime that a node is running. So it comes with problems with this mixnet. It's all like a lot of nodes, a lot of mixing. And latency is a big issue here. As you can see from slides ago, you have on the right side the anonymous mode. It says best for payments, emails, and messages. Because when I try to run this, the latency is actually sort of an issue that wouldn't necessarily be the best for browsing, but for things like payment or maybe crypto transactions where a little bit of latency would be less than an issue, it's best for those situations. And there's a lot of ongoing work in this area of how to minimize the latency for the mixnet while not decreasing the privacy or the performance of the mixnet. There has been some research into like lightweight approaches to do something like that, but still to make sure that to make sure that we have to reduce the latency while not reducing the privacy, it's still something that we could look into in the future. So I guess that sums up with my talk, and if anybody has any questions, so yeah, thank you.
Do I speak out?
Okay. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So, Alexis, right?
Yeah.
So, Alexis, thank you for the presentation. I had 2 questions that came to mind. The first one was on configuration when it came to I didn't know if I was loud enough. Is this on? Hello? I don't know what's okay. So, when it comes to configurations, the WireGuard, is that something that you can configure your own server to leverage, because WireGuard is the protocol, or does it automatically use NIM's configured servers for WireGuard?
I think it's using the NIM servers for now, because for the client when you actually use it, there are not a lot of configuration options. So that's the one that you can, that's just a default option. Like it doesn't give you many options to like change the servers or like change the protocol. So yeah.
Okay, great. My second question was about talking about Tor earlier. Something that I learned a long time ago and I live by is that you never want to register your node as an exit node. But I saw you mention kind of exit nodes here as well. Is there a layer of anonymity that we can, when it comes to offering our node up as an exit node, or is that an option when you set up a node? Are you saying, hey, I want to be a regular mixed node, I want to be an exit node? I'm not familiar with that part of it.
Right, so basically for NIM Mixnet, there's not essentially an exit mix node, there's an exit gateway. So for the gateway, you can run as a gateway, but that's sort of on a different structure as the mix node, because as you can see here, you have 3 mix nodes in the middle. So like those 3, the last one, the node 3, is not essentially the exit node. So it's like sort of a different feature than Tor.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Hello. Just wanted to also start off saying I enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you.
But I wanted to first ask for the blockchain part of the for NIM. I was wondering, particularly, sorry if you stated before, it's verifying the transactions, but what is stored on the blockchain, and can that information be backtracked, and how does that all work?
I see. So basically for what the blockchain is doing right now is storing the payment information that users made, and also just all kind of essential information that they need to broadcast to nodes on the network to make sure they're running properly. So basically I think it's using something called Cosmos. I'm not sure about the backtracking to like get your information from blockchain, but I don't think there has been any attacks found for like getting your information from the blockchain. But essentially what blockchain does is you are depositing your money to a NIM pool, which is like a wallet that runs on the blockchain, and then the validators or the gateway will check if you actually deposited money before you connect to the Mixnet.
Okay, and then my last question, to kind of be 2 parts to it, would be the first of like, has there been any papers or active research within like formally looking at NIM? And particularly, are there any issues with attacks on validators and the validator system?
Right, so for the validators, the issue with the validators is right now at the moment, not anybody can sign up to be a validator runner. You have to send an application to them, and they will need to like, I think there's like a waitlist or something. They need to verify your request, or this is something that I think you need to be vetted to be a validator runner. So I don't think that's something that anybody can sign up, because if that's the case, that just could like create a lot of problems for attackers trying to be a validators. And I think there are like research papers on this. For example, like this paper is from their white paper. So yeah. Oh.
Hi, great presentation.
Thank you.
I had a quick question. I was wondering, because there is a blockchain component, it seems like money is being exchanged. What kind of cryptocurrencies would be supported? Would I, let's say if I wanted to use this, be able to put forth money using Monero? Would that be feasible?
So you mean like what cryptocurrency it
Yes.
supports? So basically it has their own tokens, which is the logo here. They have their own NIM token. It's something that you could buy on the crypto exchange platforms, and also there's something that you could get from as a reward for running the node. So that's just their tokens.
Gotcha. I figured it was something on their own, but just
Right,
wanted
yeah.
to double check with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Are we running? Okay. I guess we'll take questions. Anybody?
I just wanted to ask, what's the minimum resources to run a node? Are you aware?
The minimum resources? So basically you need a VPS to run the node, and that depends on like, I think around maybe like 4 gigabytes of RAM, and like around like maybe like, for now, I know people running for like maybe like $20 a month for the VPS, but it's not a lot of resources. It's not designed for you to cost a lot of money to run the nodes. Yeah.
Hi, I was just curious, like, who runs the gateways? Like, can we sign up to run our own gateway node, or is it all ran by NIM?
Yeah, anybody can sign up with running the gateway. So essentially, when you're running a node, you can declare your role as either a mixed node or as a gateway. So it's just something that you declare as at your runtime. So yeah, anybody can do that. Oh, go ahead.
Is there any kind of security protocol in place to prevent a node from saying, rerouting traffic back through myself more often to demand more tokens?
Like rerouting, like as a node runner?
Yeah, can I reroute traffic to say I'm running more and therefore I
Sorry, what do you mean by like rerouting? Like,
Well, I could force, is there anything to prevent myself from forcing you to use me for all of your mixed nodes?
so basically the reason that I think would be really hard for you to force someone to use your node because the client randomly chooses a node. You don't really get to say like if you get picked. And also at the same time, the nodes, even if you did get a node to choose you, it's reordered to different layers every 60 minutes, so you really don't get a lot of say in that. So, yeah.
Can the gateway bias that? Can the gateway only publish? Can the gateway bias that by only publishing a small subset of the nodes, thereby forcing you to pick from?
What do you mean gateway publishing a node?
When the gateway helps the user connect to the nodes as the man in the middle, can they perform a I can't remember the name of the attack, a subset attack?
The gateway
Or is that
doesn't.
not possible in this protocol?
The gateway doesn't, if I understand your question correctly, the gateway doesn't necessarily help the client pick a node because that's something that client could choose. But also at the same time, it's just like the client chooses the node. You have to some sort of way like manipulate the client to control the exit gateway.
I'm just speculating on ways that you could manipulate the client to.
I see. I guess it could be, yeah.
Like, anything I can do to falsify what my secure score is, so that the probability of me having my node picked is to the 20th power. If I could get that secure score higher to falsify saying I'm more, I have a better performance, that like, now I'm more easily randomly picked.
Right, I guess, but that just depends on like how you would go about like doing that, because like right now, like it's measured on your uptime, so it's like pretty something that's like, so that's something that still depends on like a lot of factors and variables involved. So, yeah. Also, I guess we're running short on time, so if anybody has, we can take one last question. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Do you see some VPSs trying to crack down on this if they discover that's what's happening?
Sorry, what's the first part of the question?
Just that if a VPS starts seeing that this is how you're using, have you heard of any VPSs, the actual like company being upset and trying to stop this kind of service from happening, or can they detect it?
I have not heard of anything like that, like this so far, so yeah. So any more questions or? Okay, I guess we'll wrap it up then. Thank you guys so much for coming today, so thank you.